So Patrick from Young Pilots International, and what I'm going to do today is start to give you some fundamentals, some of the basic building blocks you need to know if you're going to go and become a pilot or you're going to go and fly a plane. And even if you're not going to become a pilot, this is quite cool stuff to know about. So pin your ears back and get ready and we'll get through it. People talk about the principles of flight, okay? So we've got 4 forces acting on our aeroplane, 4 forces. Now the first one, trying to stop us from flying, is weight. Hope you appreciate my very advanced high-tech laser display screen here. Weight. Weight is trying to keep us down. Now, the opposite of weight, the thing that's giving us, making us go up is lift. So lift and weight. Now, there's 2 other forces. Holding us back, we've got drag. And working opposite to the drag, we've got thrust. Now, so the theory goes, if your lift is greater than the weight, then the aircraft will go up. It will leave the ground and it will climb. So that's the trick. That's how we fly. We need to get more lift than weight. Well, how do we get lift? Well, back to this diagram here. You need thrust to be significantly greater than drag. If your thrust is greater than your drag, the aircraft will start to travel forwards. It will start to move forwards. And then you're going to get airflow across the wing. And if you get enough thrust over drag, enough forward momentum, enough airflow over your wing, then your lift will be enough to overcome your weight and you will achieve flight, which is a wonderful thing to achieve. Happy. Let's move on to the next bit then, which is the wing. Let's look a bit closer at our wing. All right, now our wing, I've given you a cross-section of a wing here. Now, there's what we call like a chord line. I'm just going to draw here a line through the middle of the wing, and that shows you the direction that the wing is pointing. Okay, chord line. But the angle of travel, the airflow will meet the wing at this angle. All right, this is the relative airflow meeting the wing. And you'll notice the wing's pointing this way, and the air is meeting the wing that way. So what you're going to get here is, and this is a really important word, and I want you to remember it, because pilots talk about it all the time, an angle of attack. An angle of attack. Now I'm just going to take a step backwards now and dumb this one down about how a wing works. Have you ever had the experience of driving very, very fast in a car and putting your hand out of the windscreen, out of the window of the car? So you're driving along and you put your hand out of the window and you present a slight angle of attack against the oncoming air. And what happens is your hand goes up and back. It gets lift and a little bit of drag. Driving along, if I get enough airflow over my hand by accelerating, okay, and then I present an angle of attack, my hand gets lift and drag, and the more angle of attack, the more lift and drag I get. And fundamentally, that's how the aircraft is flying. Now, there are other forces acting on a wing as well, all right? Now, there's a guy called Bernoulli and the Bernoullian effect, and we are going to talk about it, but not today. Today, we're just talking about Newtonian lift, which is airflow hitting an angle of attack, and you get resulting lift and a bit of drag. Are you with me? Are you with me so far? So we know roughly how a wing works. We're not going to worry too much about Bernoullian lift and high pressure, low pressure. And I know lots of you will already know that from doing physics. Right, so that's how our wing works. Now, see this angle of attack here, this angle of attack that I've got here. If I have control surfaces on the aeroplane, control surfaces. Now these are surfaces that as a pilot I'm able to move. Okay, so they hang, so one of them, for example, flaps. All right, I can put flaps down at the back of a wing. Now, can you see this flap here? It's a bit like putting your hand out of a window and catching a load of airflow. So that flap can change my angle of attack and give me more drag and more lift. Now, moving these control surfaces around the aircraft is effectively what we do as pilots. We're going to go and explore the impact that has in a moment. But come this way, because now what we're going to look at are the three axes of movement. So we've got our principles of flight. We know how we're getting lift, and we've briefly talked about moving control surfaces. We've now got three axes of movement. Okay, an aircraft will move around this axis here. Okay, and I'm just going to demonstrate that one to you. You've got my wings out. Okay, if I do this, okay, that's a rolling motion. So we call that roll. Okay. The next axis of movement is pitch. Okay, so if I'm in an aeroplane, I can pitch up or pitch down or nose high or nose low. Okay, we call that pitch. And then the final axis of movement we look at is this one here. Now there's a very specific word we use for this axis of movement, and I've only ever heard it applied to aeroplanes, and it's yaw. Yaw. So I can roll, I can pitch, and I can yaw. Okay, there's my yawing movement. And that's it. If you can master all three of those, you're not far off being a pilot. It's the work of a lifetime. Now let's go and look at the control surfaces on the aeroplane that allow us to move the aircraft through roll, pitch, and yaw. So Ben, come this way, come this way. Right, firstly, if you have a look at the wing there, Ben, have a look at the wing. And I mentioned about flaps coming down. Can you see there is a flap protruding out of the bottom of the wing? So that suddenly gives this wing loads more lift and loads more drag, just like putting your hand out the window. There it is. Okay, but there are some, follow me, come this way. All right, there are some other control surfaces that we're going to look at. So the first one, I mentioned rolling the aircraft. Well, this control surface here is called an aileron. Can you see how it goes up and down? And I don't know if you can get it in focus, Ben, but on the far side, as I move this up and down very gently, you can see the other one goes the opposite way. Now we know from putting our hand out the window that if I put this aileron down, this is going to catch loads of lift and a bit of drag, and it's going to make this wing go up. And maybe through the magic of editing, you can demonstrate that in the cockpit for me now, please, Ben. Good, so that's how an aircraft rolls. We manipulate the aileron. Let's come this way, come this way. The next control surface that I as a pilot can move is here. Okay, it's here, it's at the back of the aircraft. All right, can you see it going up and down? This is called an elevator. All right, and this controls my pitch. And you can see what happens if I lift that up, the tail will go down and the nose will go up. And if I push that down, the opposite will happen. So that's controlling my pitch. Pretty clever. And then my final control surface that we're going to look at today is my rudder. Here it is. And can you see this rudder will control my yaw? Now on the ground, it also, when that moves, the nose wheel moves, which is why I've lifted the nose wheel up to show you. But there we go. So we've got roll with the ailerons, pitch with the elevator, and yaw with the rudder. So we can perhaps explore those three axes in the air and see how that works in a real plane. We're just talking about how the control surfaces move the aircraft through three axes. So the first thing we're going to look at is this stick here will move the ailerons and it will give us roll. There it goes. Simple. The next one we were looking at is the elevator giving us pitch. Pulling the stick back, pitches up, stick forward, pitches down, stick back, pitches up, forward, pitches down. If I can do it quickly enough, I go weightless. It's great fun. All right, there's the elevator at work. And then the final one is the rudder. So here we go, there's the right rudder, left rudder. So it's giving me yaw. All right, there's not much more to it than that. You'll notice I've also got power.
and in my left hand I've got a throttle, and I can apply more thrust or less thrust depending on whether I want to climb or descend. I think that's the end. Oh, it's one thing I wanted to show you, one more control surface. I'll just slow it down, is flaps. There, I can pull a lever there, and that gives me flaps, and you can see the flaps on the wing, hopefully on the chase cam. That's scooping up loads of air and allowing me to fly really slowly, but it's quite draggy. And if you notice, I can fly with my nose quite, get myself into balance, I can fly nose low. All right. Now there's one other thing that I didn't look at so much on the ground, and that's this thing called a slip ball. All right, now that's something we're going to look at, slip ball. That tells me if the aircraft's in balance. And if I lean the aircraft over, you can see the slip ball going right. If I lean it over this way, it all goes to the left. All right, so the trick when flying a plane is to try and keep the slip ball in the middle most of the time. There we go, hope that's useful.
Let's have a look at some of the other things you might need to know about, some of the parts. Well, what we got here is the horizontal stabilizer, and it keeps the aircraft stable on the horizontal axis. It's a horizontal stabilizer, does what it says. This is the fin, or the vertical stabilizer, and it helps keep the aircraft flying straight, just like a fin on the back of a surfboard. What else have we got? Not for today, but for later on, here is a trim tab. Now we're going to talk about trimming another time, but that is a trim tab. Very interesting, and you can see a little rod attached to it. So we'll talk about that later. Okay, let's come round. This is the fuselage. We've got, now the wheels are interesting. If you can come down, Ben, can you see the wheels on this there's two wheels at the back and one at the front? That's a tricycle, or a nose wheel. Some aircraft, if you look, it's the back of this very messy hangar, at the back of this yellow aircraft, and if you can see, this one's got a tail wheel. So a tail wheel, there's a bit of difference. Nose wheel, tail wheel. Okay, back up you come, Ben, back up you come. We've got struts, all right, these give strength to the wing. These are called jury struts. You don't need to know about these, but struts you do need to know about. And then coming forward, we've got our propeller and our nose cone, all right? Here's the engine cowling. In a car, you'd call it the bonnet. We call it engine cowling. And underneath here is a load of wheels with mice. And no, it's not really, there's an engine under there, right? And then Ben, if you come into this door here, I'll go around the other side. Let's have a look in the cockpit. Okay, so round here, look in the cockpit, we've got a control column. Now, some people will call this a stick, a joystick, and in some aircraft, it's like a little steering wheel, and we call it a yoke. But it does all the same thing. Now, this does side to side, rolls the aircraft, moves my ailerons. Okay, and we can probably look at that in the air. Okay, forwards and backwards moves the elevator, and that will control my pitch, nose down and nose up. And again, we can probably look at that in the air. Down at your feet here. I wonder if you can see, Ben. Can you see these pedals, rudder pedals? Okay, that moves the rudder, that controls our yawing action. And the final thing for you to look at is something we've not looked at so far, which is power. Okay, in this aircraft, that is thrust, and that's full power, and that's no power. So generally, if I want to climb and take off, climb up, I go full power. If I want to land, I come off the power and I can turn it into a glider, and about halfway will help me maintain height. And actually, learning to use all these three axes, the control surfaces and the throttle, is all there is to flying. Once you can master all of those, you'll be Chuck Yeager, pretty much. Okay, let's go back to the board. Right, so just as a recap for what we've covered then, we've looked at the principles of flight: lift versus weight, drag versus thrust. We've looked at how a wing works, angle of attack, giving you lots of lift. And we've looked at how control surfaces move a control surface to affect the aircraft around three different axes: roll, pitch, and yaw. Okay, so what we're going to do as you go through to your next lesson with me is we're going to start to look more carefully at these control surfaces and how the controls inside the cockpit affect the control surfaces and how that affects what the plane's doing. All right, thanks very much.